set the spirit free by letting go of any grievances. Say to yourself, I am respectful. I am respectful. As we have previously been told, we are all of equal value. Intrinsically, at our core, we're all the same. Pure and loving spirit. In the world, however, we temporarily have varied and diverse attributes. There are many people that we may admire for the gifts and abilities that they exhibit. This is all very well and good, but we should not allow the esteem we hold them in to cloud our knowledge that we are all equal. Putting people on pedestals is an incorrect use of respect. Likewise, wishing to be venerated by others is a useless pursuit. We're all in this together, and we each have a role to play. And we remember what the Course in Miracles points out, that your place in God cannot be filled by anyone else. So today, hold each one precious. Do not place any above another. Because we know that generally a low opinion of oneself shows itself in a need to appear higher than others. But let us instead respect ourselves by just showing respect to all. We say amen and amen. Just keeps going. Principle first. That's what I promised in the text that I sent out. So what about that text? Now, here's what I've been trying to do. I was trying to find an app that would send a group text without allowing everyone to comment on the group text so that everybody else sees it. Oh. I was told that the one I had would do that, but then I saw people commenting. And I saw people leaving the conversation, which really is the problem, right? Mm-hmm. You know, everybody says, man, I'm tired of my phone going off. It might just be that I haven't set up the proper format, right? Anyway, I've been sending a lot of stuff out lately, try to get everyone aware of what's going on here. Friday night especially, Friday night we have the most marvelous music here at 8:30. Generally speaking, it ain't church music, but there's quite a bit of spirit to it. So I just encourage you to come on Friday night at 8:30 and check it out, see what's happening. So principle first. There is a tradition in the recovery programs. It's the 12th tradition. It says anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. To place principles before personalities. And this reading happens at all those meetings, thousands of meetings every day going on around the world, and that reading happens, and that 12th tradition is read every single time, and it's still one of the most prevalent questions of, if we read this every day, principles before personalities, why are we still not doing it? Right? So this is, and it's actually when I do the weddings, it's the 12th instruction I give to the then happy couple. Yes, to be equal and to always go to the principle of things, and in that way to escape the shortcomings of personality. And they're always, it's always there, right? It's this, and what is it, this personality that, sometimes we're very enamored of our own personality. At other times we are in love with the personality of others, but they just can never act right consistently. They seem just delightful in some moments, usually at the beginning, right, Nate? At the beginning. So, and then when we get to know the personality, then sometimes it becomes a problem. And there may be some things that the person does, or, people in general, but the specific person might just do something that just drives you crazy. Well, you don't say anything. Well, not at first. But it's like a little irritation, right? It's like this little irritation, not saying anything about it. And I've counseled a number of people, and this is a common refrain that I hear from people when I talk to them individually before we do the group thing. So I really love him. I really love him, and I love everything about him except for this one thing. I would really like to change that one thing. Oh man, it's a fruitless effort. It really, you can actually, you can kind of train people. It's not a good idea, but you can kind of train people to act a certain way, or they get the idea that there's certain things they can't say or do when they're in your presence, but when the pressure is applied, it comes back with a vengeance, right? So the idea here is, what's the principle? So we think about any kind of conflict that we have with anyone, that if we just ask ourselves, just stop for a moment, and this is we are given. We are given grace, that we can pause for a moment. And I'm not talking about a moment where all of a sudden the silence gets uncomfortable. I'm talking about just pause for a moment and try to allow Spirit, the Holy Spirit, to give us some direction. A lot of times I actually have to ask, let me see what's really here, because I know I'm missing the point. Let me see what's really here so that I can respond the way that I should respond. And now all of these practices that we talk about here on Sunday and on Wednesday, it might on the surface look like we're just trying to practice this way so we look like good people. Well, now there's nothing wrong with looking like good people. But the reason we do this is because this is actually the path to happiness. The path to happiness is to have the ability to listen to spirits for guidance as to what to do in the present moment. Because when we listen for guidance as to what to do, we don't do the thing that causes suffering. We get that. We get just that moment, and then the ability to move in the direction of love. And this is very important for this whole discussion about personality, is this love. What is this love? We begin to believe that love is, well, the Greeks had all sort of different names for different kinds of love. right? But when we say love, people think romantic or they think platonic. Like I've got friendships and I've got romance, right? Some people may think, well, I love my children. And but if we go back and look at what really are we talking about here? When we're talking about this essence of love is the ability to feel connected first to another person, but then really ultimately the ability to feel connected to all people. And even further than that, the ability to feel connected to all life. And then there's a second component. The second component is the desire that only good come to them. And that means regardless of their personality. That means regardless of the thing they just said. That means to want good to come to them regardless of how they just acted. Now some people say this is unconditional. This is unconditional love when we can do that. And most ask the question, most people would say, well, I have unconditional love for my children. But then upon consideration, when we remember, when things didn't go that well at school one day, we might have got called in or got, things happen. I remember one day we've had a lot of problems with our son Kyle, and it was just one thing after another. And now this was years ago, but one day we lived right over here and he went to Lincoln. One day, one of his friends showed him a .22 pistol. And Kyle thought it would be a good idea to take it to school. Well, now even then, this was a big deal. Caused quite an uproar, right? It wasn't loaded. Regardless. So we went through all this with the police, and it was a big deal. The week afterwards, I was sitting in the living room watching television. There was a knock at the door, and I go to the door, and there's a guy in uniform. And I say, "Oh, it's not the police this time. It's a fireman." It was actually the fire marshal. And he asked me I told him who I was, and he said, we have your son Kyle in the car out here. Him and his friends just burn a house down.
Oh my God.
Well, now when he says they just burn a house down, I'm like totally freaked out. Like, oh my God, put some family out of their home. All these things are running through my mind. Well, it was an abandoned house, and they had been sneaking into the basement of the house and having their little whatever meetings, and they had candles down there, and they started a fire burning. It was, but still. So that day, I wasn't all that unconditional. So now here's the thing about this unconditional love and this ability to put the principle before the personality. The thing about it is the principle stands no matter what. Whether I ignore it or whether I put my total attention on, the principle is there. I can act like the principle is not there, but the principle is still there, always there, right? So the principle is that I just feel connected and that I desire only good to come to them. That's the principle in this case. That's it, right? That doesn't mean that I tell them it was okay to burn the house down. It just means that in my heart, I'm still holding him in the light. That I'm not like, so this is what I remember about being a child and being punished. And when I grew up, I think it was very common, and now it's still with some people, they thought corporal punishment was appropriate. And I remember when I was punished, when it was my mother, she always would strike me out of anger. It was very apparent that she was really mad. And she put a whooping on me totally out of her anger, right? And that felt, I remember clearly feeling very powerless and fear and more this sense of this upset about being disconnected from my mother. Like she's so angry, right? And but then on the other hand, my dad, well, after he got, one time it was not real good, but after he got older, whenever he would decide it was time for corporal punishment, it was very cut and dry. There was no anger involved whatsoever. It was just like, this is what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. This is going to do it. There was never any show of him being upset with me. Now, neither one of them, I will tell you, I don't think either one of them was appropriate. However, I did not feel disconnected. When of course, I wasn't looking forward to it, but it was a whole different experience because he was thinking that he was on principle. He's thinking he's just on principle. This is the way it's supposed to happen. This is my responsibility as a parent. I'm supposed to do this to make sure the kid grows up to be socially responsible. You know, this kind of thing. It was a totally different way of approaching things, and I felt a lot different about it. I don't know. So, the ability to feel connected and the desire for only good to come to the other person, to come to all people, to come to all life. This is the ideal that we are striving for. This is the first principle. The first principle is love. And this is what, if we remember, and I just love this is what Jesus said when they questioned him about the law. They wanted to, according to the scripture, they wanted to trip him up. They wanted to have him say something that would incriminate him in the eyes of the local religious authorities. And so they said, tell us, what is the law? And he said, the law is like this. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. The second is like unto it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And then she said this most important part. He said, on these two hang all the law and the prophets. So now at this point, not just the law, see, also the prophets. And what he's talking about is the Hebrew Bible. The law and the prophet, that's the Hebrew Bible. That's the whole thing. So he's saying to these guys, that's it. Love is it. On love hangs everything. And by implication, if you can't find love in it, you're not reading it right. You're missing the point. So they were reportedly dumbstruck by the answer, right? But so this is first principle. First principle is love. And that's what it all grows out of. Now here's the thing. I am still noticing, every day I am noticing your personality. I am noticing my own personality. Well, I'm noticing your personality, sometimes it is pleasant to me, sometimes it is not pleasant. When I'm noticing my own, sometimes I'm thinking I'm doing really great, and other times I'm thinking I'm really falling short. So these judgments are happening all the time. And they have something to do with how I then interact with those around me. But if I remember this idea of the first principle is love, and I can bring myself back into that state of mind that I was in before I made the judgment, then I can extend love. And again, you know, we were talking about this last night, that this does not mean, when I extend love, it does not mean that I am going along to get along. But when I am extending love, somehow I am given the ability to say the helpful thing. Many times I'm given the ability just to shut up and not have to say anything at all. Just be quiet. There's no use in even saying anything, right? And you know, it's funny that a lot of times the words have been on my tongue and I'm ready to say something pointed to someone who I believe that they're acting outside of what they should be, and instead I've been silent, and suddenly it is revealed to them that they have been outside of perhaps where they should have been. Didn't have to say anything at all. Now there's silence and there's silence. I mean, sometimes my silence can really be quite pointed, right? So anyway, to come back to this idea, of that all these principles that we talk about, all the principles we talk about are based on this idea of love. Based on actually the ideal of love. And so that if I can remember that and ground myself, and you know, what I used to do is I tell the story, the Love the Baby story. And I'm not going to tell it this morning, but I will talk about the technique and the practice. That when we're having trouble centering ourselves in that feeling of love, all we have to do is remember someone. We can take a person that's in our life right now or was in our life before or sometime in the past. And I use my granddaughter, who was our first granddaughter, and I remember when she was a baby. And the love that I felt for that baby. And how I felt when I held her close. And the connection that established between us, the bond that established, and the peace that was between us. I can remember all that. And you know what? Every one of us has had some experience when we have held someone, whether it was a child or whether it was someone else in our life, when we have held them close and felt ourselves melting into them. And so if we can remember that for a moment, anybody who's given us a hard time, or who we think given us a hard time, we can in our minds return to that place and that time when we held that precious loved one and how that felt, and see in our mind that we can hold this person who we're having a problem with right now the same way in our mind. Probably don't want to just snatch them up off the street and start hugging them up, but just to see it and to feel it and to remember. And this is actually the technique of forgiveness that is laid out for us in the Course in Miracles. It says the way that we forgive our brothers and sisters who we are judging is to see the face of Christ in them. So this would be the ultimate thing to see, and then and over time, this practice for me, I used to when I first read it, I used to see this. The face of Christ was like the picture of this fair-haired Jesus that was in the Baptist church when I was a kid. I would see that face. That's not really what the Course is talking about. But now what I do is in order to get rid of this judgment and to be able to hold the person in front of me in that pure love, I see no features whatsoever. And that's really the bottom line to this principle in this tradition, is to not see in other words, to see nothing about that person that triggers judgments from the past or fears about what may happen in the future. In other words, to see their face as shining light with no feature but that apparent. That the face of Christ itself is beaming with light to the point that you cannot see that Arabic nose, which was, I'm certain, there. Right? And that this is the technique. So it works. This works. So when I want to remember, that I want to get back to that first principle, I can remember someone I love, and I can put that on this person that I'm having a problem with. Or, sooner or later, I'm going to get to the practice, and I'm going to get good enough at it that I can see the face of Christ in you. Knowing that that's, and this is what the prayer list is all about. This is what our whole practice is about. That all of the things that I may know about you or think I know about you fall away into dust. And I see nothing, feel nothing but love. Nothing but light. And I'm at peace with my personality and with yours.